morning, everybody. Welcome to the first session in 2025. This year, we're going to cover a lot of interesting teas. You're going to get in-depth knowledge about these teas. You're going to get scope. You're going to get context. That's what we promise here at Sophie's. So today, where's the scope going to come from? What's the context going to be? Well, let's get ourselves on a continent first. Let's see. Oh, Asia. All right. All right. We'll get on Asia. China. All right. Let's zoom in a little bit more. How about Yunnan Province, Southwest China? And by the way, I opened in an uncharacteristic way because I didn't tell you about the idyllic conditions that are going to exist throughout the rest of today's broadcast. So the tea that we're doing today is called Idyllic by chance. And where in Yunnan are we going to be? You see, Yunnan's a very large piece of property in China. Oh, it's more than property. It's a provincial area in China, quite huge. On the north, it borders Tibet. On the south, it borders Burma. So many, many different climates. So today we're going to be in the Ailao Mountains. Ailao Mountains run north to south in China. They run somewhat parallel to the Yunnan Mountains. And so there's a valley in between the two mountains. What is it about the Ailao Mountains that makes it so special? There's lots of reasons it's special. First off, they have a World Heritage National Preserve. In that preserve, there's over 100,000 acres where old and ancient tea trees exist. And the tea trees, in order to be counted in this 100,000 acres, at least 3 inches in diameter. Some of these things are full-grown trees, 80 feet tall. Diameter is up to about 3 feet. These are big things. Why Ailao Mountains? Why not somewhere else in China? Has to do with the natural terroir and why, in fact, has so much attention by Chinese scientists been focused on the Ailao Mountains. Well, they've known for a long time that the Ailao Mountains have a lot of interesting flora, a lot of interesting plants, a lot of interesting animals. I think in recent years, and so let's define recent, in the last 50 to 60 to 70 years, they've realized, oh, year by year, more interesting plants and animals than we realized before. Oh, interesting varietals, different species of the camellia plant, but related to the tea plant. So there's been more and more focus. Now, for a long time, this focus really existed at the scientific level. It didn't exist at the tourist level. In a minute, I'm going to give you proof that the tourist level has now become very important, but not necessarily in a good way. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the next 9 weeks are going to be about red teas. Red teas are heavily oxidized. So if green tea is unoxidized, red tea is the opposite end of the spectrum, heavily oxidized. Usually somewhere from 90 to 94%. Out of the Ailao Mountains, you have indigenous peoples living there, and they have a different methodology for the heavily oxidized. And sometimes their heavily oxidized teas only go to about 83, 84, 85%. So that suggests or should suggest you that there's probably a little bit of a different flavor profile. Now, as I said, we're going to have 9 weeks of red tea. And so as you take note, we should be focused not only on aroma and taste, all the normal things that we take note of when we're talking about tea. Let's take note of the terroir, because turns out everywhere that we're going to talk about, there are areas where it's totally, totally beautiful. Just out of this world beautiful. Air is good. Water is good. Lots of it. What else is good? Lots of plants. Lots of different animals. That's all good too. You've got biodiversity. So let me read you something that was translated in the Chinese Daily. That's the English version of the main Chinese newspaper in China. And here they talk a little bit about the Ailao Mountains. I quote, "Activities such as visits and tourism are prohibited in many of these areas in the Ailao. And it is also an area that has been repeatedly mentioned as being very dangerous." Why has this reached a national level? Is this Westerners descending on China and ending up in the Ailao Mountains? No. This is a translation of an article that goes to people in China, talking about how dangerous. How did this place really get discovered? Well, during the pandemic, some intrepid traveler hiked and took selfies and recorded parts of the visit, talking about the mystery and the wonder of the Ailao Mountains, showing these fabulous panoramas. Now later, when somebody, and by the way, this person got, I think, 30 million views or something. And so then everybody in China, because pandemic, where could you go? Well, you could go other places in China. Hey, let's go to this wonderful mystical place, because this little videography, you did not have hardly anyone except people in the tea industry wandering down to the Ailao Mountains. Remote. We knew it was dangerous. Before we applied to bring our friends from here to the Ailao Mountains, we were told, oh yes, very dangerous. Be careful. We'll make sure we have people there. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about the setup. We'll eventually get around to the tea. But I want you to understand the terroir, because you're going to see that every place that we go with red tea, generally speaking, you're going to hear me use the words dangerous in it. You're going to hear me use biodiversity. So when you get to the World Heritage Site, is there some old big announcement so that you know, oh yeah, here's the World Heritage Site? No, not really. It takes forever to get there. Well, that's not true. If it were forever, I'd never be in front of the camera as often as I am. It takes a long time, long bus ride. And then when you think you've got there, you say to yourself, well, where is it? Well, it's in these mountains. That's not very helpful. So you find the closest waterfall. Ah, okay, now I'm feeling like I'm closer. And you go up to the nearest bathroom, that's kind of a euphemism, the nearest bathroom. And then you see, oh, there's a trail and plants are identified along the trail. I've made it. I've made it to the Ailao Mountains. And then you go climb, climb, climb. And after about 40 minutes of climbing, you come to a shut gate. The way is closed. Now, if you're a local person, or if you're us, you remember, oh yeah, there's a key hidden up here. Because there is a padlock on it. You look around, you figure out where that key is, and you open it up, and now you've entered the reserve. So again, tell me, why is this place so dangerous? First off, the Ailao Mountains stretch like the Sierra Nevada mountains for hundreds of miles. That's one thing. The climate within the mountains, you get these vertical climates. What is that? Vertical climates. Well, you get areas of cold, areas of subtropical, and areas of tropical, all in the same relative 10 miles, 10, 15 miles. So in the warnings they give, there's a warning about hypothermia. That means, you know, if you get a little chilled and then you don't put a sweater on, you're going to get more chilled and you're not going to feel like walking anymore. Very dangerous. And along with that warning is a further warning. Okay, so you realize you're getting hypothermia. All right, I got shelter. I got to find me some shelter. Give me some shelter. And so you look around if you're not lost. But even if you're lost, you look around for shelter. Further in the warning is, many places look like they'd be good shelter places. Let me remind you, so goes the warning, that other things live here. Oh no, what sort of other things? How about some bears? How about some boars? You know what? I haven't mentioned the cat family yet. Let's get some cloud leopards. We don't want just leopards, cloud leopards. Okay, so you're thinking gigantic things. Okay, I gotta just keep I'm feeling hypothermic. I gotta just keep my eyes open. Make sure I don't shelter in place with a boar or some other big animal. That's all well and good, except there are snakes here. What kind of snakes? They have cobras. How very inconvenient. What else do they have here? What if I just climb a tree and shelter in place on a tree? Well, how about a community spread along the mountains of about 500 Western Asian gibbons? Gibbons are a type of ape. Now, They're a type of ape whose wingspan is more than 50 inches. They get through those forests real fast using their arms, swinging through the forest. They have monkeys. So you're not alone in this forest. You are not alone. All right, let's say you've avoided all the big things. Snakes aren't necessarily big, but they're big enough. What about the leeches? All of you feeling pretty comfortable about lying down or finding shelter in place? 30 different varietals of leeches. I should have amplified or modified that. Hungry leeches. So this is why experienced people have lost their lives in the Ailao Mountains. All right, but there's trails, aren't there? If you stick to the trail, there are trails. And the trails have an opening point and a terminus point. They just don't wander through the mountains unless you live in the mountains. Now, there are indigenous peoples who live in the mountains, in villages, but they know the mountains. They grew up there. They know the inherent dangers. Outsiders do not. So there have been quite a few accidents and deaths, falling off cliffs unexpectedly, falling into miasma. Now, who in the world ever heard of falling into miasma as an issue? Well, in this area, it's reported that you can walk into areas and the air is so poisonous that you fall into unconsciousness, and then other things can happen. This is the Ailao Mountains, folks. If you go off trail, perhaps if you just had carried a compass with you, or better yet, had an iPhone with you, because iPhones have GPS, right? And even say, iPhone too expensive, just give me my compass. Does this guarantee that you're going to find your way home? The answer would be no. There were 4 experienced geologists who lost their lives in this area. And why did this happen? Well, aside from the fact they just simply got lost. They did have compasses, but the compasses were wrong. Oh, you mean the compass wasn't made somewhere properly? Not what I mean at all. Compass work great in certain areas. It doesn't work great in some parts of the Ailao Mountains. Why? Because apparently among the rock underground, a lot of it is heavily magnetic. Therefore, you go in the wrong direction. It influences where you go. Now, these things all sound pretty serious. They are serious. Ailao Mountains is not a place to play in. And yet you still have tourists. I've seen the pictures of the places we took customers in 2019. And those places are packed with cars and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, here's the start of the problem. This is the start of a big problem. And the Chinese now are more and more aware of this and are taking more and more measures to limit and control local tourism, because you get off the trail, you run the risk of never coming back. So where's the tea growing the Ailao Mountains. It grows anywhere at the lowest levels from about 1,800 feet above sea level, all the way up to about 8,400 feet above sea level. The sweet spot is 3,300 to about 6,000 feet above sea level. Which part of the Ailao Mountains should I be looking at if I want to make sure I find tea instead of cloud leopards? You should be looking towards the west, the western part of the Ailao Mountains. That's where the ancient tea trees are, the old and the ancient. Were they at some point cultivated? There's evidence that as long ago as 1,300 years, they were indeed actively cultivated. Obviously, they weren't doing red tea at that time, but the trees were being cultivated. Not only the Camellia sinensis, but Camellia thaliensis, Camellia blah blah ensis were all being cultivated. At the end of the day, Camellia sinensis became the majority that were cultivated. And through evolution, it appears that they naturally evolved to be the main species of tea tree. Still to this date, you can find the thaliensis. And if we could find anybody producing tea at that level that would reach our boards, Camellia thaliensis, we would have it. We've tasted it, tastes good. We haven't found tastes great yet. We're working on that. It sounds like to me, as I describe this, that maybe there's some more things that are going to be found in the Ailao Mountains. And the answer to that is clearly yes. So in the early 2020s, in the midst, and by the way, they didn't reveal the exact place. They did say it was Dam Muir Mountain, where they found a community of 7 old to ancient trees. And scientists went and analyzed, why is every community of ancient tree now analyzed? And why is it that immediately this is reported back to scientists? Because the scientists analyze and collect the germplasm, that's the genetic material, and then start to figure out how old, how's it related to other genetic material, and that fills in the gaps of development, of evolution of the tea tree. And this small community indeed did fill in a gap. So they continue to look. I'm not kidding when I talk about there's lots of discoveries still to come, because while it's romantic to think of going into this misty filled forest with gibbons and cloud leopards and seeing an adventurer put a boat on a river in the middle of the Ailao Mountains, or stream, I should say, and paddle down, sounds very romantic until you get out there and start doing it. Very dangerous. By the way, one of the hilarious things about this video that this particular person put out, this is a Chinese person. He didn't notice, and it was only a very sharp observer noticed that he's doing the recording. Oh yes, I've come to this place. There's a little cove here. I'm gonna put my boat in. Gets in the boat and starts paddling downstream. A very sharp observer saw in the background a python slide into the water. Very dangerous area. So the tea from this area, how is that processed? Who found it? And in a minute, we'll start tasting. So there's several villages in the Ailao Mountains, and the villages, while what I'm about to say seem far away, you know, a couple hours away from civilization by walking, realistically, they're along established paths. If you live in the Ailao Mountains, you know the sign points, you know the paths, and therefore you don't get lost. You don't get eaten, you don't have problems by and large. And you get to your community of tea trees. Over the ages, you've been harvesting them. And over the ages, you've been producing tea. What type of tea have you been producing? Well, really two types, red teas and fermented teas. So we're not going to talk about fermented teas today. We're going to talk about the red teas. So when you find these trees, are these trees all lined up? Oh, there's 7 trees lined up. These are probably tea trees. Oh no, that would be too easy. They are within a relative area, but they're in the midst of a forest, sometimes with pines, firs, magnolias, sour cherry trees, growing all around. Ferns, mosses, sometimes enshrouded in fog for most of the year. This is the environment under which these live. I have spent this time focusing on this because, again, as I said, all the places that we're going to talk about red tea have nearby environments that somewhat resemble this. This is the most extreme of all the environments. And by the way, by being so extreme, you get ancient tree. If it had been easy to get to, oh, it had been overrun by herds of tourists, and you wouldn't have ancient tree. This is hard to get to. So how do they process? How's red tea in general process? This move from scary terroir into things that are easy to understand. You take the leaves. Somehow, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about the pick. You pick a leaf bud along with an accompanying, usually 3 to 4 leaves. You take that mass of leaves and the bud, you bring it on home, and you lay it outside if it's not raining. If it's raining, you make sure you keep it inside, because you cannot remove moisture from leaves if you're leaving it out in the rain. In fact, you're doing exactly the opposite. So it's got to be inside if it's raining or dewy, outside if it isn't raining or dewy. You get sun. You're trying to reduce moisture. How much moisture are you trying to reduce? Well, it depends. Every farmer a little different, but somewhere between 30 to 50% of the moisture in the leaf you want reduced. So what goes into the farmer's head to make that decision? Because it's a wide range, 30 to 50%. Family lineage, history of dealing with teas from this area. Understanding the seasonality of this area. Oh, I picked later this year, so there's going to be more sun, so I'm going to be able to do it. Or I picked earlier this year, likely to be more dewy. So if I can get it down to at least 30%, then I can start working with it indoors. So all sorts of factors that go in the mind of the farmers that make this decision. Yes.
What time of year for the pick? This is from Jeremy. And are there multiple pickings?
So this is a great question. When you're deep in the forest, what time of year is it? And do you dare go more than once a year? So you always pick during the spring. The indigenous peoples always pick in the spring. What date is hard to say because year by year it varies. Why does it vary? If it's raining consistently, it's muddy, it's inconvenient, we're not going now. If it is sunny early, and what do I mean early? End of February, start of March, hey, let's take this opportunity. But I mean, it's got to be sunny a number of consecutive days. Jeremy's question actually touches on an important part of this topic of what is this terroir like? For all of those we took up there in 2019, the one thing they saw was ferns and moss everywhere, water resources everywhere. Well, that's not an accident. It's not torrential rain that's creating it. It's a little rain every day, drizzle every day, overcast every day. So they're looking for that break in the spring where it stops being quite that intense on a daily basis. Give me some sun in the morning. Hey, it's time for us to harvest. Okay. And then Jeremy further followed up and said, well, after they harvest this ideal time, do they ever go up there again and say hello to their beautiful trees and harvest again? So the technical answer, the answer that you would give to the public is no. They really don't go up there to harvest again, although they will go and visit the trees and make sure that everything is okay about the trees. Occasionally, you'll have a family that'll go for a later harvest. And I don't mean a fall harvest. Later in the spring, much later in the spring is really what I mean. They're really harvesting once a year. Realistically is how you should think about this. And so the immediate thought all of you should have is, oh my God, you only harvest once a year? That's not enough for a village, is it? So there's a complicated answer to this. Let me simplify. This isn't the only crop that they're harvesting. And the key question is, are they growing monoclonal tea further south of where the ancient tea trees are? And the answer is yes. So they can harvest those more than once. But the ancient tea trees, no. You harvest once, and over the years, this has become more and more profitable because as people have understood, oh my God, there's a different energetics, there's a different taste, there's a different feel about ancient tree. And who goes up and finds these things? Well, it turns out these villagers have known about these trees for a long time because they lived in the area for a long time. So I'm going to go through, oh yeah, okay. I'm reminded I've already talked a lot. I'm going to quickly finish up the processing. They bring it in, they wither, they get it to the right amount, and then they roll it. You got to damage the leaf in order to expose the innards to the outside oxygen, have an oxidation process. After you do oxidation process, you basically shake. And then last step, you apply heat. And there's several ways to apply heat, but let's assume baking for the time being. And that's it. God, that sounds simple. If only I had an ancient tree in my backyard, I could be rich, famous, rich and famous. All right. First session of 2025. It took me this long just to go through the process, but you get terroir as an added benefit. What else today are you going to get? You're going to get a guest speaker, a friend, and somebody who's worked with us in Japan, who is going to talk to friends who are on broadcast in both China and Japan and here, because he speaks all three languages. And this is just a little introduction because what you may not know is we do have a number of people who watch our YouTubes in Japan. So it gives me great pleasure to bring forth Liam from Japan.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Liam. I'm so glad to take part in this tea testing today. It was great and amazing. And from now on, the Sophie's Cuppa tea will have some new projects in Japan, and I would be very glad to offer my help in any way. 日本の皆さん、こんにちは。デン・コーと申します。これからは、ソフェスカッパティは、日本にもどんどん、新しいプロジェクトを、日本で広げようと考えております。中国のお茶葉、お茶の文化に、興味にある方は、ぜひ、フォローしてください。どうぞよろしくお願いします。
Thank you very much, Liam.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, for the next part of the session, which is a regular part of the session, let me bring up the blessed, numinous tea master to demonstrate Idyllic, and then to go ahead and brew with you. So without further ado, Biju, English and Chinese speaking, Biju, tea master.
Thank you. Yeah. 我叫 B 组，Chinese name 叫小北。Yeah, thank you so much. So Happy New Year 2025. Yeah, 新年快乐。Okay, today we do Ailao Mountain tea in Yunnan. So this is the here. Yeah. So same tea, so prepare. So yeah. So this is the how many grams? 6 grams. Yeah. So keeping this, the dissipate steam. Don't forget. Okay. So temperature start at 175, but I use the 172. Okay. So brewing the 4 minutes.
Final brewing temperature on this is what? 170 or 172?
170, aim for one, she's gonna use between 170 and 172, but if you're trying to just set a temperature, set 170. Remember, you cannot hurt yourself by going lower. You can hurt yourself by being higher.
Okay, I start so for cup. So 175 times two, for waters.
For warming the cup.
Warming cup, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So warming cup. This is warming cup, that 175.
So it's a normal tableau you've seen before. She uses 3 cups to speed up the process of dissipating the steam, oxygenating the water, getting that temperature down to where she wants it. Okay, she's gotten it to where she wants it. She puts the 6 grams into one of the heated cups, shakes the leaves to try and get them all exposed to the heat. Puts the water back in the kettle, empty kettle, so that she can control the pour. Because ideally, you'd like to not pour directly on the leaves, you'd like to pour from the side of the cup. And start the timer in 4 minutes. So one of the things you notice right away is, unlike any of the other red teas that you're going to see, this has more starting inconsistency than any tea that you will see. What do I mean by that? Color inconsistency. You have a green, you have a black, you have a red, you have all sorts of different colors here. Is that an accident or is that on purpose? That's on purpose. Remembering that they're oxidizing to a lesser level and they're not sorting out inconsistencies, including stems. So they have stems in here. What's the value of having stems in tea like this? It kind of solidifies the body. Why would you not do that with a very finely produced red tea? You don't need to solidify the body with very finely produced red tea. Very finely produced red teas are denser. These are less dense. You notice the leaves, or you will notice that the leaves are larger. So we're getting here into details that you should take notes on, because over this 9 weeks, you're going to see quite a bit of variation in what the leaves look like. So these are not mistakes. This is how they do this. This is, let's talk about who I'm talking about. They. This is how the indigenous peoples do this in this area. When we first saw this, we thought, oh, full of mistakes. Answer is no. We were full of misconceptions. This is purposely done this way. And when you taste it, you're going to get a very distinct taste that's very different from, say, a Chiman produced red, where everything will look the same. The leaves will be smaller. They'll be roughly the same shades of color, and the density will be much greater. So you have in each of these places, so we'll be in Yunnan, we'll be in Anhui, and we'll be in Fujian. Each of the places has a different characteristic based on lineage of the farmers and the habits that they've developed over the years. And this is really interesting in Yunnan because, remember, the local people developed this themselves. It wasn't the people from Anhui who came to Yunnan. Because the people from Anhui who came to Yunnan did not go to the Ailao Mountains. They ended up in Fengcheng. So Fengcheng received deep influence from Anhui. Ailao has received some influence from the tea scholar community, but they haven't received a direct influence like Fengcheng received from Anhui province. So these are all things we'll talk about over the next 9 sessions. Because you'll see it makes a huge difference in terms of the final product. I rushed through, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. Time is up. So let's go through the steps here. Separate the tea leaves carefully from the tea water. If you save these leaves, you're going to get outstanding second and third cup. So we enter the quality arena, and right away, lighter quality. This is supposed to be, in quotes, black tea, isn't it? Red tea, isn't it? The answer is it is red tea. It's just not oxidized as much, but it still falls within that category. Right away, there is a very distinct aroma. And for me, having the experience that I've had over the years, this I immediately recognize as not 90%, 90+% oxidation. This is less oxidation, yes.
Peter says, amateur question here, if successfully pouring to the side of the tea leaves in the cup, if in that process some leaves float dry on top, do you let them soak in the water or use the last bit of the water to pour over them?
Great question. So Peter says he's observed because he uses scientific precision when he analyzes what we're doing. He's observed that sometimes when we pour on the side, there are some leaves that at the top remain dry. Not many, but there's some. You know what? We don't pour over those leaves because we're almost always going to have a second and third cup from this. And so we let those leaves kind of stand in reserve to really infuse or be the center of infusion for the second and third cups. Great question, Peter, and great observation. All right, so I'm going to enter the quality arena, and that means do a sip, 170 degrees, so you can take a larger sip, coat your tongue, figure out where the feeling, astringency is in your tongue. You swallow, what sort of aftertaste, and then you're going to be looking for energetics. How do you feel? No, you don't do it. I'll do it. So oh my goodness, there is a lot of astringency. I'm not going to tell you where because it's different by person, right? Genomically, we're different. I'm already catching an aftertaste. I'm already catching energetics. The Ailao teas tend to get to you faster. What do I mean by that? Whatever energetics there are seem to project faster. It's not subtle. This is very forward in terms of how it feels on your tongue. Aftertaste is subtle. I'm going to take one more sip. I'm going to verify what I think I detected, and I'm going to pay attention also to aroma and taste. So again, pay attention to this aroma when you do it, because almost all the Ailao teas red teas, this is what I'm talking about, have something that touches on this aroma. Okay, I've settled in my mind the astringency question, aftertaste question. I'm still dealing with energetics, have a sense of the aroma, have a sense of the taste. It's your turn to brew. So presumably you've set your timer for 4 minutes. You're drawing your water. You're heating your cups, making sure there's no residue of anything that doesn't belong. And you notice, I was reading about, occasionally I wander over in the philosophies. So I was reading about Zen masters and how when you get Zen masters cleaning something that they clean every day, they clean fast. And many times there's this assumption that, well, wait a minute, you gotta have the Zen attitude, which means it's gotta be real slow and steady and elegant and beautiful. And the answer is no. Just like with tea, it's learning the craft and being present. It is no different. And so when you see the tea master doing this, she's actually very speedy. And that's because she understands the steps. And more than understanding the steps, because you can book read the steps and you won't be this speedy. It's because she's done this 10,000 times. When you do something, this is this thought that if you do something 10,000 times, you master. Well, if you've done it 10,000 times wrong, yeah, you master the wrong way of doing it. But if you have been taught and studied hard and with being present have done it 10,000 times, all of a sudden you're real quick. You're real facile. You really know how to do this stuff. All right. So you put the water in, you set it for 4 minutes. Now we get a chance to wait. Okay. So part of what we were just talking about, we rushed through the processing. And so if you were to ask me, what's the most important part of the processing? I'd say all of it. And then if you really pressed me, I would say it's the rolling part. Because the rolling part, when you are doing these leaves, it isn't just about force or lack of force. It's the right force. And it isn't, oh, okay, the rule book says I've got to roll for 90 minutes. So you close your eyes, I'm rolling for 90 minutes. Alarm goes off. Okay, I rolled for 90 minutes. This is going to be great tea. The answer is no. Were you present during those 90 minutes? No, your eyes were closed. You were somewhere else. You have to use your eyes when you're rolling because you have to get a sense of what do the leaves look like. Do they look like they've been rolled sufficiently? 90 minutes is a throwaway figure that people use. Yeah, you roll for 90 minutes and then you're going to get a result. Now, that doesn't tell you that you're gonna get an ideal result. If you're present like the farmer is, they're smelling all along. They're feeling the leaves all along. And at some point, year by year, at slightly different time periods, they say, okay, it's ready now. But you only roll for 42 minutes. Doesn't matter, it's ready now. So the best of the cooks, the best of the producers of any craft, yes, they do have a recipe, without question. But they also know to observe the reality of the situation. And when you're observing the reality of a situation, you know exactly when to do stuff because you've done it 10,000 times. Yes.
Rob says, the scent of the warm leaves, the leaves just put into the warmed glass before steeping, is umami with a hint of chocolate.
So Rob talks about the hints of the aroma of the leaves that are warmed in the glass before you even steep. Talks about umami, talks about chocolate. In general, you're going to hear, especially the word chocolate, more and more as you go through the red teas, because generally speaking, many of the reds, not all of them, but many of them start to waft off that chocolatey smell. And it's wonderful and unexpected. I think when we first started in the tea business, we were a little surprised by that and then came to grow accustomed. Yeah, you should have it. Yes.
Jeannie shares, I get a dried fruit aroma from the warmed leaves.
Love this. Dried fruit aroma from the warm leaves. I also get this. And so again, taking great notes about Idyllic, what you're going to find is that this is a characteristic of many of the ancient tree Ailao teas. So your timer went off. Separate the tea leaves from the tea water. Remember to save those tea leaves. You're going to get a couple more steepings from it. Go ahead and after you have created the glass of it, think about entering the tea arena and figuring out what it is that you're detecting, because this is special. This is ancient tree. And at the end of the day, the energetics are going to be incredible. It comes from the forest. Very dangerous forest. Cobra's forest.
Delightfully dangerous forest.
Delightfully dangerous forest.
Cobra's
Yes.
gotta eat. Rob shares the steep leaves have notes of floral and pipe tobacco.
Floral and pipe tobacco. Now, this is a really, Rob notes this. This is a really, really interesting observation. I think all of us immediately understand the floral because Jeannie hinted at it with the fruit in the aroma of the leaves themselves. And remembering fruit and florality, we're using two different words for something that's close. The pipe tobacco, I get that reference actually, which if I hadn't smelt this, I wouldn't have gotten. But I do recall some pipe tobacco does have some sorts of hints of florality to it, unexpectedly, mixed with the vegetal nature of the tobacco. So I don't disagree at all with that observation. Great catch. Yes.
Jeremy says, from the homely mumble jumble. I'm start that again. From the homely mumble jumbo of tweedy, irregular leaves that have the scent of a flower garden, and wet leaves with the scent both vegetal and a hint of burnt sugar, takes me to golden, delicious liquor that coats the tongue and immediately warms the
Wow. Love this description, Jeremy. She ends up at warming the core. So let's start there because that's an energetics observation. And not only is it an energetics observation, I'm going to go one step further. This is ancient tree energetics observation. Generally speaking, ancient tree does have that grounding, warming to the core nature. Jeremy starts it off with the dry leaves like being in a garden, a flower garden, with various little scents of different florality. And then she goes into vegetal.
burnt sugar.
Ah, yes, and the burnt sugar. How could I forget that? So, really, Jeremy has just said to me, using this poetry, you know what, John? You told me this was ancient tree from some remote place. I'm going to tell you back, this is real tea. And that's what you've done. You've identified all the qualities of red tea, ancient tree from this area. Great, great description. Yes.
Rob says, the scent of the tea water is like a combination of subtle cider and ocean, as it might be contemplated from the faraway mountains.
Oh, this is interesting. Rob talks about the scent of the tea water as being like ocean and cider,
Subtle.
subtle cider. So let me turn that around because I flipped it because he started it with subtle cider and then ocean from afar in the mountains. So let's talk about this subtle cider for a moment because I get it. And I want to amplify that because when you have cider right out of the tap, hot cider right out of the tap, many times that's fully engaging and overwhelming. It's great because it reminds you instantly of the holidays. I don't think that that's at all what Rob is talking about here. He's talking about subtle, the subtlety, the hints of cider right away you get. And you're not so much in the holiday situation as you are in a really good red tea situation. Love this comment. Love this comment. Yep.
Peter shares a very pleasantly and evenly spreading grounding. Seems like a mixture of the powerful grounding like a oolong and the even internal spreading grounding of a yellow tea.
Oh, what an interesting comparison. So Peter brings us home talking about the earthquakian grounding of an oolong mixed with that subtle grounding of the yellow tea and talks about that as what this is. In other words, an even ground. That's what he called it, an even grounding as something which, and I'm going to put a word in his mouth because the even I already had in my mind balanced, extremely balanced grounding, balanced in flavor, balanced in grounding, whole works. And that's one of the things that I really love about this tea. Very, very clean, very, very balanced. This is from the forest, the ancient forest.
Jeannie says, agreeing with Peter, astringency is immediate on my tongue.
You know what? I was so surprised, and just like you, I try and imagine every time that we enter the quality arena, that this is my first time in the quality arena with this team. And so that's what I did. And so you noted that my reaction at the beginning was, oh my God, this is so quick. And what I was really talking about was that astringency. That astringency is immediate. And for me, and this will sound weird, so just chalk this up to understudy weirdness. For me, it's like a swirling astringency on my tongue.
Rob says, there's a sense of buttery feel on my tongue that I was not expecting. And it has a kind of an after feel on the center of the tongue. If that is really astringency, it's a smooth one.
Huh, okay. So for Rob, because the interaction with his tongue is different than with mine, his is more of a butteriness and it runs right down the center of his tongue. And he's thinking, for him, this is really smooth. The smoothness of this tea, really part of what I was talking about with the cleanness of this tea is that smoothness. The flavors are not muddied at all. The flavors are distinct. You've already all noted heavily grounding, balanced, nothing that doesn't belong. This is like a symphony and all the instruments are playing their notes correctly. You don't have discord, no dissonances in this melodic symphony. Yes.
Jeremy shares, even a hint of black coffee as I close my eyes and take another sip.
Jeremy mentions going to Mordor. Not quite sure why we're in Mordor, but a hint of black coffee.
But
Maybe-
her eyes were closed.
Her eyes are closed. Okay. Maybe a hint of Kona coffee, because I've had Kona where it doesn't, there's that hint of smoothness and cleanness. And if that's what you're referring to, I get it. I get it.
Peter says, this is a hell of a red to kick off this series.
Yes. So Peter notes that understudy doesn't do anything small in a small way. And you're correct. We've kicked off this tea. I'm sorry. We've kicked off the reds with a very sophisticated and very powerful red tea. And one that most of the people in the US have never tasted anything like this. You all are in a very select group by having this. Yes.
Rob says, maybe it's smooth like velvet, but not smooth like glass.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and Jeannie agrees with that as well.
Smooth like velvet, but not like glass. So it's the sense that there is, I think I get this, because if it were smooth like glass, you drink it down like a juice. Smooth like velvet suggests you're having to taste through as you're drinking and to detect all the, I get that. I really get that. And let's tie that to its appearance, because its appearance was that wild appearance where you have branches. Oh, you don't have branches. That's ridiculous. You have stems, you have leaves that are almost unoxidized along with those that are oxidized. So the velvet is getting the richness of the whole texture of what you have. That's really a good observation. And by saying it like that, particularly when you said not like smooth glass, it's really obvious what you mean. Good catch. Okay. Oh my gosh, I started out the year exceeding schedule. That's not a good sign for the rest of the year. Usually the beginning of the year, you try and end early, to get everybody encouraged. Oh yeah, he'll end early. And here I am way over time, and yet there's another comment. Yes.
Yeah, another energetics comment. Rob says, this is making me feel full of energy and clear-headed.
Full of energy, Rob notes, and clear-headed. Yes. I like the clear-headed part of this because in order to analyze this tea, you have to be on your marks, so to speak. You have to really be paying attention because while it's grounding and the temptation to drink fast might be there, in order to get the full appreciation, drinking slowly and going through this exercise gives you a different appreciation. And again, I hope all of you are taking good notes because during this 9-week journey, we're going to cover a lot of ground, just like we did with the cliff teas, but this is a completely different ground. And again, we started off today with terroir and really, really got you at home with that terroir. As we go through this, we'll always come back to that. All right. As usual, you always prove why you are the greatest. And you always help provide lessons to me. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to spending this time with you on the Reds. Next week, we move out of the idyllic into the felicitous. Your responsibility this week, stay healthy. See you next Saturday. Bye-bye now.